Part 1 expanded approximately 700 words. The night her parents sold her, the sky looked as though it was collapsing. Thick, muddy rain poured from the heavens, splattering against the clay courtyard with the weight of stones. The storm made the lantern light flicker on the walls, elongating shadows until they looked like twisted hands reaching for Liora. She stood barefoot on the cold earth, her shawl soaked through, her hair plastered against her cheeks as she listened to the argument happening just a few feet away. Her parents' voices cut through the storm like knives. "She's worthless to us," her mother spat, her voice hoarse from crying or shouting. Liora couldn't tell anymore. "A girl who can't bear children has no future. What husband would keep her? What family wants a burden?" The words struck Liora harder than any blow. She turned her face away, pretending the rain was the reason for her trembling chin. Ever since the doctor in the village whispered the verdict, "It is unlikely she will ever conceive," her life had been drowning in shame. Neighbors began speaking in hushed tones. Aunts avoided her. Her father stopped looking at her altogether, as if the absence of children somehow erased her humanity. Tonight, they had decided they were done pretending. Across from her father stood a broad-shouldered man in a dark, rain-soaked coat. His face was obscured by a low hat brim, but his eyes glinted with something cold. In his hand, he clutched a small leather pouch. Liora could hear the faint clink of coins inside. "It's not my business what she can or cannot do," the man said in a voice as flat as iron. "She'll serve well enough in the northern camps. I can get a few years' labor out of her. Years, not months, not weeks, years." Leora's breath caught. Her mother crossed her arms tightly, as if holding herself together. Her father hesitated only a moment longer before nodding stiffly. The stranger tossed the pouch toward him. The coins spilled into her father's palms with the sound of betrayal. "That's it, then," her father muttered, closing the pouch. Liora stared at him. Her father, the man who once lifted her onto his shoulders when she was a child, the man whose hands once smelled of walnut shells and honey. Tonight he couldn't even meet her eyes. The stranger stepped toward her, grabbing her wrist with a grip that felt carved from stone. Liora flinched. "Come," he ordered. She wanted to scream, to run, to beg her parents to stop this insanity. But as she opened her mouth, nothing emerged, only a small gasp swallowed by thunder. Her legs felt heavy, almost numb. Fear turned her into a statue as the man dragged her toward a wagon waiting outside the gate. Behind her, she heard her mother say, "God forgive us." But no part of her believed they deserved forgiveness. The wagon was filled with coarse men smelling of sweat and pine sap, along with sacks of tools, axes, saws, rope. The stranger pushed her into the back, her knees hitting the wooden floor. Before she could steady herself, the wagon lurched forward, pulled by two heavy horses. Hours crawled by as the road wound farther into the mountains, deeper into the forest where trees towered like silent sentinels. Shadows flickered across the men's hardened faces. They barely noticed her. To them she was another tool, another worker, another forgotten life to be spent in the mountains. By dawn, they reached a cluster of cabins surrounded by felled trees and smoke-soaked chimneys. A rough-looking man shoved a pot into her arms. "You'll cook for the lumber guild," he barked. "You'll clean. You'll stay out of the way. Try to run, and the forest will swallow you whole." Liora nodded silently, her throat burning. The forest felt endless, dark and alive, whispering warnings she couldn't understand. Days blurred into each other. She chopped firewood until her palms bled. She washed heavy coats and boiled water for meals. The men treated her like a background noise, useful but invisible. Except one. Part 2 expanded approximately 700 words. Bram kept his promise with a seriousness that startled Liora. Before the sky had fully shaken off the night, he was already at her side. The forest was still dark, the pines swaying in the dim blue shadow of dawn, but Bram worked in silence, handing her a thick wool coat and wrapping it around her trembling shoulders. "We leave now," he whispered. "Before anyone wakes." His voice carried no hesitation, no doubt. Liora stared at him, her breath clouding the cold air. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked, her voice barely more than a cracked whisper. Bram paused, then met her eyes with an honesty that made her knees weak. "Because no one deserves to live as property. And because you remind me of someone who used to be kind to me when I didn't deserve it." He did not explain more. He didn't need to. She simply nodded, holding the coat tightly. He lifted her onto his horse with a gentleness she had not felt in years, then climbed up behind her, guiding the reins quietly. The horse stepped through the snow-softened ground, its breath steaming into the morning air. The ride through the forest was silent except for the rhythmic crunch of hooves and the rustling wind. Liora curled into the coat, shivering both from cold and a fear she couldn't name. Every time she looked back, expecting shouts or torches, there was nothing but trees fading into the distance. By sunrise, they crossed a wooden bridge spanning a river bright as liquid silver. The land opened into a clearing, a soft meadow crowned by tall grass and wildflowers slowly waking beneath the early light. "This is home," Bram said quietly. Liora's chest tightened as she took in the sight: a sturdy log cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, a small chicken pen, a woodpile stacked neatly by the door, and a garden fenced with care. Everything felt warm, lived in, and safe. But safety did not ease her fear of not belonging. As they approached, the cabin door burst open and 4 children rushed out, 2 boys around 10 and 12, and 2 younger girls in simple cotton dresses. Their laughter died abruptly when they saw the stranger riding behind their father. They froze mid-step, exchanging wary glances. Bram raised a hand. "Children, this is Liora. She'll be staying with us. Treat her kindly." The eldest boy stepped forward protectively, eyes sharp with suspicion. The youngest girl, freckles bright on her cheeks, peeked from behind her brother's arm. Liora swallowed. "Hello," she whispered. The little girl mustered her courage, walked up, and reached for Liora's cold hand. "Are you freezing?" Liora managed a weak smile. "A little. Come inside." The girl tugged her with surprising strength. "Papa makes the fire big in the mornings." Inside, the warmth wrapped Liora like a blanket. The cabin smelled of pine resin, warm bread, and something sweet, honey maybe. The walls were lined with shelves filled with hand-carved toys, simple wooden bowls, and little trinkets clearly made by the children. "This is beautiful," Liora murmured. "It's messy," Bram's younger son corrected proudly, "but it's our mess." Bram disappeared into the bedroom to hang his coat while Liora helped the children fold laundry, sweep the floor, and prepare breakfast. The hesitation the children first had slowly cracked open into curiosity. They asked questions: where she came from, whether she liked bread or porridge, and if she could braid hair as well as their father. She found herself laughing softly as she showed the girls how to braid ribbons into their hair, her fingers moving out of pure memory. Days turned into weeks. Liora proved gentle, patient, and surprisingly capable. She mended torn shirts, helped plant winter vegetables, and soothed the younger children when nightmares stirred them awake. Slowly the house brightened. Lanterns shone longer, the fireplace glowed warmer, and laughter returned to corners that had grown cold since Bram's wife died 3 winters before. Still, Liora kept a respectful distance from Bram. He was hardworking and quiet, but never harsh. Yet there was something about the way he watched his children with such fierce tenderness that made her heart ache. He was a man who knew loss. One stormy night, lightning cracked across the sky, shaking the cabin walls. The children ran into Liora's small room, crawling under her blanket for comfort. She held them close, humming old lullabies her grandmother once taught her. Bram stood quietly at the doorway, watching. "You're good with them," he said softly. "I never thought I'd be needed," she admitted. Part 3 expanded approximately 700 words. Spring arrived slowly, dripping color into the world one bloom at a time. The snow melted into soft earth, the river swelled with clear water, and the once silent clearing around Bram's homestead buzzed with new life. Liora felt the change in herself too, as if her soul, long trapped under winter frost, had begun to thaw. Each morning, she woke before the children, stoked the fire, and watched sunlight spill across the wooden floorboards. It felt like a new kind of beginning. She helped the children press seeds into the garden soil, carrots, onions, and a patch of wildflowers she insisted on planting, just for beauty. The children giggled when she smeared dirt on their noses. Even Bram, normally stoic, occasionally cracked a smile. One warm afternoon, she was teaching the youngest girl how to weave small flower crowns when Bram returned from the market earlier than expected. His expression was tense, too tense for an ordinary day. The moment he saw Liora, his jaw tightened. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Her heart faltered. She followed him into the cabin while the children continued playing outside, unaware that their world was about to tilt. Bram removed his gloves slowly, as though choosing his words with care. "Someone was asking about you in town today." Liora's breath left her in a painful rush. "The guild, yes." He met her gaze, steady but troubled. "They've reported you missing." Her knees wobbled. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. "Bram, if they find me." "They won't," he said immediately. Too immediately. His voice carried confidence, but his eyes betrayed something more complicated, fear. Liora pressed a hand to her chest, trying to calm the tremor inside her. Tears threatened, but she forced them down. They'll punish you for helping me. They'll punish the children. Bram's voice softened. I don't regret helping you. And I don't regret bringing you here. He stepped closer and placed a warm hand on her shoulder. You are not a slave. You are not theirs. But fear doesn't listen to comfort. For the next several days, Liora lived on the edge of every sound. Hoofbeats in the distance made her flinch. The crack of a branch in the woods tightened her breath. She slept lightly, clutching a blanket to her chest, convinced that the guild would appear at any moment to drag her away. Meanwhile, Bram moved through the house like a silent guard, checking windows, keeping the children close, chopping wood with twice his usual force. The children sensed the tension but didn't know its cause. Their innocent questions made Liora's heart ache. One evening, just as the sky blushed gold, the inevitable happened. Hoofbeats, heavy, coming straight toward the homestead. Liora froze mid-step. Bram appeared in the doorway, axe still in hand, eyes narrowing as three men rode into the clearing. The same kind of men who once hauled her into a wagon like a sack of coal. Stay inside, Bram murmured. Take the children, but Liora stepped outside before he could stop her. She would not let him face them alone. The guild leader dismounted, his boots sinking into the soft dirt. His eyes traveled over Liora with that same cold appraisal she had endured all her life. You've caused trouble, girl, he said. You belong to the guild until your labor debt is paid. I belong to no one, Liora whispered, though her voice trembled. The man smirked. A barren girl is worth little, but you still owe work. And we intend to collect. Bram stepped forward, positioning himself between Liora and the men. She owes you nothing. She was taken by fear and force. She doesn't go back. The leader scoffed. A noble speech from a man with 4 mouths to feed. You really want another burden? Liora's heart clenched, not because of the insult, but because Bram didn't flinch. Not a muscle. If she stays here, Bram said quietly, she is not a burden. The forest held its breath. Then, in a moment that still felt surreal even as it happened, Bram's eldest son emerged from the cabin holding a hunting bow, hands shaking but brave. The younger children followed with wooden sticks, forming a small protective line behind Liora. The guild men exchanged glances. There was something in the scene, a widower standing firm, his children trembling yet defiant, and Liora holding her ground with more courage than she ever believed she possessed, that made the men hesitate. Finally, the leader spat on the dirt. Not worth the trouble. They mounted their horses and rode off, swallowed by the trees. The moment the hoofbeats disappeared, Liora's strength collapsed. She burst into sobs, falling against Bram's chest. He wrapped his arms around her with fierce protectiveness. It's over, he murmured. You're safe. You're home. The children surrounded them, hugging Liora tightly. In that circle of warmth and trembling relief, she realized something powerful. She had not been born empty. She had not been born broken. She had simply never been loved correctly. But now, here, in this clearing, with Bram and his children, she finally found the family she thought she'd never deserve. And she never let them go.